Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone, and thank you for watching our Writers Trust Inside Voices live stream chat. Today, I have the enormous honor of revealing and chatting with the 2020 Writers Trust Rising Stars, who have been identified as writers to watch by 5 influential Canadian writers. My name is Rachel Giese. I'm a journalist. I'm the editorial director of the LGBTQ2S publication Extra. I'm the author of the 2018 book Boys, What It Means to Become a Man, which won the Writers' Trust of Canada Shaughnessy Cohen Prize for political writing. And in addition to having this very happy honor of announcing this year's Rising Stars, I'm also very proud and delighted to be one of this year's selectors. Before we begin, on behalf of Writers Trust, I want to acknowledge the land from which we are live streaming is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat people, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. The theme of today's live stream conversation will be how writing life has been affected by the global pandemic. How have routines changed? How has inspiration and creativity been altered? And how are each of today's writers working and coping at this particular moment in time? And on that note, I want to mention the Canadian Writers Emergency Relief Fund, which is a joint program from Writers Trust and the Writers Union of Canada. It was created to support writers in this difficult time. And the final deadline, and this is important, to apply for a $1,500 grant is May 7th, midnight Pacific time. You can find the application and the details at writerstrust.com/relief fund. And for today's chat, I want to let you all know that we want to hear from you. So please share your thoughts, your congratulations. If you have questions for the writers in the comments, you can do that in the comments or by using our hashtag, which is hashtag WT Inside Voices. That's hashtag WT Inside Voices. And at the very end of the conversation, I'll be bringing those comments and questions up for the writers. So please send us your thoughts, your comments, your congratulations, and your cheers to this amazing cohort of Rising Stars. I also want to let everyone who is watching know that closed captioning will be available for the duration of the stream. Okay. Now, on to the surprise reveal. The Writers Trust Rising Stars is an annual program that invites 5 established authors to each select and mentor one writer in the early stages of their careers. In addition to receiving this one-on-one guidance and mentoring from the writer who selected them, Rising Stars receive $5 and attend a series of professional events. And they are also invited to go to the BAMP Center and have a period of time there where they can write and think and work on their projects. That's been delayed a little bit this year because of the pandemic and because of social isolation protocol. So hopefully we can get these authors to Banff as soon as it's safe to get them there. So this is very exciting to introduce the participants. I'm going to be introducing them east to west. We're going to follow the sun across the continent as the future stars of Canadian literature. Our first rising star is Lorax B. Horne.
Hi.
Working on, hey Lorax. Lorax is a journalist currently working on Hacks and Hacks, a memoir about the intersection of technology and people. Lorax is my pick as a rising star. And as I said to them when we had our first conversation, this was an incredibly selfish pick on my part. I am so dazzled by their work, and I want to see more of Lorax's writing and thinking and voice in the world. So I'm very excited to be working with them. And this is what I noted in my citation. They bring empathy, precision, and a profound curiosity to everything they write. Lorax joins us today from their writing room in Dartmouth, Nova Scotia. Congratulations, Lorax.
Thank you so much, Rachel. It's been really exciting to think about my work and work on it. Even at just the start of our relationship, it's been great.
Excellent. Okay, we're going to move a little bit further west with our next rising star, Canisia Lubrin. Hey, Canisia.
Hey, Rachel.
So nice to see you.
And you.
Canisia is a poet, editor, and teacher currently working on both fiction and nonfiction projects. Her new poetry collection, Dyzgraphxst, was published in March. She was chosen by Anosh Irani, who had this to say about her writing. Canisia's work is both sombre and uplifting, unearthly and grounded at the same time. Her landscapes displace you in ways that are disturbing yet delightful. And Canisia joins us from her writing nook in Whitby, Ontario.
Thank you so much, Rachel. It's a great honor to be here.
Yeah.
Thank you. And also to Anosh.
And next, on to our next rising star, I'd like to introduce Laura Trethewey. Laura is an environmental essays. The Imperiled Ocean was published earlier this year. Hello, Laura.
Thanks for having me.
So nice to have you.
It's a great honor.
Laura is being mentored by Rosemary Sullivan, who's an example of fervent and heartfelt environmental writing, the kind we need now if we are to save our world. And Laura is joining us from her home by the sea in San Diego, California. Congratulations.
Thanks so much.
On to our next rising star, Carly Baker. Carly is a writer of short stories and essays whose current work in progress is described as brutally honest autofiction. Of her writing, selector Thomas King said, "With an eye for disturbing and humorous details, Carly is a rare talent who can make you smile and cringe all in the same sentence." Carly joins us today from her living room in East Vancouver. Hi, Carly. Congratulations.
Hi, thank you.
It's so nice to have you join us. And we're going to hear more about your brutally honest autofiction later.
All right.
You're going to tell all. And finally, last but by no means least, is our final 2020 rising star, Troy Sebastian Napku Akflam. Troy is a Tunaha writer working in fiction. He was selected as a rising star by Lynn Cody, who had this to say: "Everything about the work of Troy Sebastian feels original. His unpredictable structure, his extraordinary characters, his way with a completely unanticipated metaphor." Troy joins us today from his home office in Victoria. Congratulations, Troy, and welcome.
Kisuk Westnam, good morning. Thank you very much. It's great to be here and part of the constellation of rising stars.
Yeah, it's a fantastic group. And we're going to start by bringing everyone on board and having just a more general conversation about what their life is like right now and how they are working. And then we'll be talking a bit more specifically with each of the writers about their upcoming projects and maybe some of the things they'll be working on with their mentor selectors. And just a reminder, if you have questions or comments or congratulations, please put them in the comments or on social media. The hashtag, once again, let me find it, is hashtag WT Inside Voices, and we'll have some time at the end to bring your questions and comment forward. So I'll start with a go round. Maybe we'll start where we ended with Troy. And I wanted to ask all of you, how you are faring and whether COVID and social isolation protocol has changed your routine at all. Has it changed your writing work or your creative work? How has it been for you, Troy?
Well, for me, I've been working from home for a number of years, as is my partner, Inismin Pashki, also works from home. And so we've got to know our coworkers a lot more in the last couple of weeks or last couple of months. And that's great. And we have a really strong relationship. That's such a beautiful and privileged part, core of my life. And then just the part of living in a condo in, again, downtown Victoria, the heart of the empire in a lot of ways, and this new normal. Often I find the need to write, and the purpose and the offering of writing is often a reaction to a multiplicity of colonial oppressions. And so to see the speed at which the state is taking, COVID-19, which for good reason, seriously, in one hand is obviously positive, but on the other hand, the experience of that so many Indigenous peoples in Canada, face all of the time of constantly seeking the barest minimum of human rights recognition and support, and all the health challenges that we face. I mean, it's a totally bizarre juxtaposition. And so my writing, I've just been mostly writing my dreams down every morning, and that's probably been my main output thus far.
Yeah. Carly, and I want to pick up on some of the things that you said, Troy. I'm going to check in with everybody, and I want to circle back to that question about government action, and also about how much this has brought to light, I think, for folks, the already existing disparities or inequalities or the lack of action on certain issues. So I want to circle that back once we get further into the conversation. Carly, how has this been for you? How has this current moment shaped your creativity, or changed it at all, or changed the kind of work that you're thinking about or writing about?
Yeah, despite being someone like fairly isolated on a daily basis normally, this year was definitely a little bit different, in that I was teaching at SFU, so I was able to get out, and I was a writer in residence and a Shadbolt Fellow this year too, so I was up at Simon Fraser quite a bit, and it's not far from home, but to be with students was really great. I felt a great loss to have to cut that class short, but we were also, we're out on the streets protesting the occupation at Unistaden and Wet'suwet'en Inlands. So we were out a lot. There was a lot going on before the pandemic reached us here. So now here we are back in our place, in our boxes, lockdown box, we've been calling ours, and there was a pretty big end to what for me was a more public and community focused year than I've had in a while. And yeah, as far as writing, I'm at a funny place where I had just reached the point with my novel that I've been working on for like ever, where I had sort of come around and was like, yes, okay, now this is it. I understand. I know where I'm going, but I've been putting it off. It's hard to teach and write at the same time. I wasn't sure if it was just me, but it's always so great whenever you get a chance to talk to other writers, and they're like, no, it's not just you. Where it's hard to do both at once. So I was like, okay, so school will end, and I'll have this time, but I have not. I'm really anxious to get back to it. I think that, I can't wait to see my characters again, and maybe there's an escapism involved in that would be really good and healthy and helpful right now. But I'm not, I had to go through the couple of weeks of doom scrolling every day and focusing outside of that. So, I hope to get back, but I'm not there yet.
And Laura, how about you? What does life look like for you right now?
Yeah, I mean, as a writer, I also don't go out that much, so it hasn't changed that much. But there were sort of several stages of accepting that coronavirus was going to be a big game changer for me and my writing. And, so at first I just kept doing what I always do, which is writing and researching and pitching ocean and environmental or science-based stories to magazines. And that didn't get a whole lot of traction. The world had sort of shifted. So then I tried to write coronavirus related stories around those topics. So the environment, the ocean, science, things that I usually covered. And I just got scooped on all of them because I'm not that sort of writing hustler. That's not really my method. So then I decided it was a really good time to finally write my next book, which is all about how humanity is going to use the deep sea in the coming decades. So I was telling people that I was doing that. I was, telling friends, family, but I wasn't actually really doing that. So I think I'm actually living a more honest life these days. I'm actually writing the book that I said I was going to write. So.
Great, thanks. Canisia, how about you? How has there been an impact on your work and your writing in the last couple of months due to the pandemic and to self-isolation?
Thank you for the question, Rachel. Writers and other kinds of knowledge creators are usually relied upon to do just that, to put knowledge out into the world to help people find a place where they can calibrate a certain sense of things, But for me, much like Troy said a little bit earlier, at least in the first half of this social distancing protocol that's been put in place, the dreams were consistent nightly, vivid, lucid, even. And for some reason, I did not feel compelled to write them down because I think perhaps it's just part of the new calculus of living through a pandemic. New, very new thing, for maybe all of us in this screen. And so I think, given the fact that my process, certainly for writing prose, which is a little bit different than for poetry, is that I spend a good chunk of time in contemplation of my subjects, in contemplation of the world, in contemplation of the things that I attend to when I put pen to paper. And so this is what has defined my writing life largely during the pandemic. It's been a lot of thinking, a lot of attending to. And much like Carly, I teach online, and yes, I was teaching an in-person poetry course before this whole thing. And it was devastating to have to move online because I think there's something that being in a room full of people adds to learning, to language, to writing, to selfness and selfhood in the world. And my students also expressed very similar sentiments. So it was kind of heartbreaking to do that, but some of us were able to pivot and deal with it, and others kind of gave up those courses. And so it's been quite interesting to be in this place where I'm not doing a lot of writing, but I'm doing a lot of thinking. And that's part of the process as well. But I will say that my grand contribution is that yesterday on Twitter, for breakfast, I made coffee and then I put bay leaves in the coffee because I already had the bay leaf in the cup, and then I took it out, ground it up, put it in the brewer with the coffee, freshly ground coffee beans. And it was fantastic, really surprising what it did to the coffee. It took that rusty taste out of the coffee. and with notes of cinnamon, even notes of nutmeg, but it's just the bay leaf in there, and it kind of, it took a great deal of attention, I think, away from the tragic stuff for a while, and I thought, why not just share this with people? So I tweeted that out, and then I have I might have started a trend. There's a lot of responses on Twitter, from "I rebuke this" to "Oh, that's gross, that's just gross," and then we had a whole heap of people excited to try it out. And the first review came back this morning that it is surprising. That's a surprising twist, at once earthy and refreshing. So that is my grand contribution to the planet right now. Put some bay leaf in your coffee. Let me know how it goes.
Honestly, like, that was worth the whole tuning in here. We now have like a coffee hack. Thank you, Canisia. And Lorax, finally, how has this been? How has this been for you? This period of the last 6 or 8 weeks or so. Has it been a change for you in terms of your work and your writing and thinking process at all? And what has the impact been?
It's been somewhat of a change in that every day is the same, and so the struggle to form these habits is simplified, and so I have found it a little bit easier to get into writing when every day, like, I'm going through the same routine in order to wake up and get sorted. So it's been good in getting me to sit down and write, and it's also been good in focusing projects. Like, certain ones are just impossible to do with the way the world is changing, and other ones become more interesting. So it's changed my way of deciding what to work on, and it's maybe changed a little bit of the format of how I would usually work. As a journalist, I'm always plugged into what's happening, and this month, 2 months, that has been a little bit too much, and everybody is suddenly informing everyone else, and so I've been stepping back from the news cycle and taking more of a overview and sort of trying to develop more insight into what I'm seeing than I might otherwise. So it's definitely changed my work in that regard. And then the habits, I've become really good at meditating as soon as I wake up, and that has been a really important step of how I've been getting through this pandemic, just like that sort of like strict structure with myself.
It's interesting, hearing all of you reflect on this time and sort of seeing some maybe some similar threads come through. I think about, Troy and Canisia, you both talked about dreams and thinking about your dreams right now. Carly, you talk about, even though as a writer, your life is a very solitary one, your life leading up to this had been one of activism out in the world. So activism, in public, in coming together in the real world. And I think, Laura, hearing you and Lorax talk about the kind of needing to slow down a bit as journalists and not sort of leap in with the quick take or the fast story, that there's something already in our world, particularly in terms of social media, of that kind of ever-present, that kind of, I think it was Jenny Odell talks about the amnesia of the present moment, that we exist outside of context. And in this moment in particular, it seems that there is this tension between the slowing down of of our world in many ways, and that, you know, we're tied closer to our homes, but also perhaps a speeding up of information, that the news cycle has not slowed down at all. There's sort of more noise, and so I guess I'm curious, maybe to get back to perhaps your pre-COVID habits of finding that space and time for contemplation and for thinking, and you know, wanting to understand. You know, there was a quote. This is from Thomas King, one of the selectors, who said 95% of writing is staring out the window. And I wonder, you know, for all of you, you know, have you been effective in slowing these things down for yourself? And are you learning some new things about yourself as a writer, or about the kind of work you want to attend to now in these past few months? Has that brought anything new to you? Maybe I'll start with you, Carly. Are you staring out your window more? Do you find that this has created more room for contemplation, or is this building on an already existing habit for you?
Yeah, it's a bit of a conflict now, I guess, for me, because I love silence, and I mean the deep silence. And so one of the things that in the first couple of weeks when lockdown, I mean, that took a little while, but when lockdown finally sort of people took it seriously, I was just constantly actually, looking out the window. And like, we live in kind of a badass neighborhood, and you know, folks are out partying, and so it was very quiet, and I was totally transfixed by the what's the right word, like the sense of deep silence out on the street, which is really uncommon where we are. And there was one day, but then also you can hear people. And there was a day someone was using some sort of power tool, and it was really early on. And I remember thinking, like, I was doing this self-talk, you know, don't get upset. It's not these people's fault, but it was this whine that really came through in what would normally be just sort of like a white noise, neighborhood white noise. And so I was really focused on it. And then I heard someone from their balcony say, "Enough!" just call, and it stopped, the noise stopped, and then sort of started up again quietly, and then a little while later, you know, "Stop, that's enough." And I was grateful, because, you know, I didn't want to be that person. Canisia, we were talking off camera earlier about, you know, how I'm so worried about being too, I came from a, like, children are meant to be seen but not heard family sort of, and I'm so worried about making too much noise and disturbing anyone right now, but it was a cool moment. I was just grateful that it was that person and not me. So I guess that's it. I was focused on the sensory aspect of the quiet, and maybe a little intimidated by it as well. I haven't been out very much, besides to just go take the garbage out in the back. And I feel like where for months I had been so grumpy about, like, oh, I can't even have a moment of quiet in my back alley. Then all of a sudden it was completely quiet. And, you know, I think things about, I mean, there are some of us who are always aware of this, but the fear of being out on the street anyways is something for a lot of folks. And so that is, I feel like I'm rambling on, but there was a conflict between me wanting to hide from the extreme sensory aspect of silence and wanting to really just think about it all the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Canisia, I know that you said when you were reflecting on the current quarantine, I don't know what a clock is anymore other than a ruler. And I'm wondering if how sort of thinking about what Carly was talking about, how have you adapted to this blending of days, this sense of perhaps what can feel a bit like timelessness. How have you, other than making a killer coffee recipe, what which is no small feat, but in terms of this bringing shape to your day, or are you welcoming the shapelessness, perhaps, of the way that your days are unfolding now?
Yeah, that's perfectly put. I do welcome the shapelessness, because I don't think I've ever felt at home in what felt to me like the tyranny of life in the before, and the way life was structured in the before. Anybody who knows me could probably tell you that I complain about the fact, that our lives are entirely predicated and structured upon this idea of work and production and consumption. And that, we're kind of born into the social conditions that are pre-laid for us to not be able to say no to these sort of tyrannical structures. So you're born and then you have to go to school because you have to be trained into a form of extraction. The same thing happens in various, different kinds of certainly colonial religions. You have to be a servant and be best served in X way or Y way, and I'm not against service, what grated at me, or still does, is really the tyranny of it. So much so that we are taken completely out of ourselves. We are taken completely out of structures of community, structures where we are even better suited to practicing our humanities from our various locations. And so, yes, I welcome that shapelessness. And so, yes, the days blend together, and I just had a book come out, and I've done several virtual events, including for the fantastic, the Festival of Literary Diversity, the Fold. And I've had some quite amazing conversations with co-panelists, with people who are tuning in from all over the world. And the different forms of access that have opened up, that are reminders of the possibility that there are actually better ways to structure our lives. And so to sit with that has been profound. And so, yeah, the clock doesn't seem to me like a ticking thing that puts pressure on how much you've done and how much you've accomplished. The clock has become a kind of ruler, a kind of distance measuring between one thing and the next, whether it's a simple, accidentally stumbling upon a coffee recipe, or working on finishing the last few stories of my short story collection, in which, of course, this world is sipping into in ways like it could not have happened before the pandemic. And then now, I'm quite excited about this new rhythm of communicating with Anosh Irani, who is on the opposite side of the world right now, about my novel project, which needs a huge amount of work. And so, yes, it's, taking all of those things. And because I'm a writer who works from a place of social consciousness, the glaring inequalities, that are popping up everywhere, the terrible, speed, it seems an extra accelerated speed at which people are falling sick on indigenous reserves and indigenous communities, the Black and poor communities and people of color communities who are being really adversely affected on this side of the pond. All of that is finding space in my mind right now, in my heart. And so the shapelessness is allowing me to exist in this way, that I think is more generative and less tied to a certain formula of what it is to be productive.
Yeah. I want to pick up there because, Troy, you had mentioned at the top, witnessing how quickly governments can act when they see when they say something is an emergency, and all the emergencies that have not been recognized and acted upon. So whether it's the work of reconciliation, whether it's adequate healthcare in Indigenous communities, and I think that all of your work, all of you, write about issues of of politics, of identity in some form or another. And I'm curious about, I guess, this political component. I know that often writers don't want to see themselves as political people, but I think that in this group, many of you are engaged politically. What are you hoping we can act upon? I think we're in this moment of seeing how quickly governments can stop things. They can stop schools. They can stop. They can, shut down certain elements of healthcare systems and open up others. They can say to some people, "You're essential," and you're not. And I'm curious if you could maybe start by talking a bit of your reflections on watching the speed with which this action has occurred. On the level of governments and businesses and organizations, and what that makes you, what you've been thinking about on that.
And that's to me?
Yeah. Yes. Okay. I know it was a long journey to get to you, Troy, but sorry.
I've heard that before. It's okay. Well, I meant to say this earlier, but I wanted to thank and congratulate all the people, all of the writers and the mentors and the Writers Trust for this opportunity. To do this on a Monday morning, the beginning of a month, May the 4th, be with us all. It does feel really good, and it is creating a positive community. And to thank also to everyone who's tuning in. I know there are many people that I care and love for who are who I let know early about this, and they've tuned in. So to me, that is an intention of creating something positive. To the question of being a writer and being political, I mean, it's not by choice. We are politicized by nature. Tunaka people, Indigenous people in this country, people who are actively being colonized all of the time, and one cannot live without contemplating that or with seeking alternatives to contemplation, which oftentimes is through a pathology of work and as sort of Canisia was talking about in terms of the communities that I come from, of just sort of bearing down and pulling the roots out and going at it day by day. And so to have this time to stop and reflect, for myself to realize this is the first time in many, many, many years that I'm not, actively working within a job or a task or in school is fantastic. I feel very privileged and lucky. In terms of what government is doing and not doing, we see so many announcements being made by both the federal government and the provincial governments. As you said, this is essential, this isn't. The national interest is pandemic proof. That's absolutely clear. The movement of whether or not it's one pipeline or another, or essentially another railroad, I mean, that is perpetual and is fundamental to the existence of Canada. So if one's life and community are inherent to be in opposition to that, then the national interest will never work for us. In terms of the speed of things that occur, I mean, if this truly was a reaction to take care of everyone, then yeah, I mean, the land would be back as of noon today. I mean, there's the land back movement in terms of actually having Indigenous territories restored. That is something that could not and should occur absolutely right now, and it's something that I've been contemplating. But in terms of looking out my window and thinking of Thomas King and stay calm, be brave, and wait for the signs, and I'm absolutely one of my favorite writers of all time for sure. I was listening to the news, and I try not to do that at all anymore, but I was listening to it this morning, waking up, and I heard the Prime Minister mention something about the 75th anniversary of the liberation of Holland. And every hour here, because it's so quiet, and because there are so few buses and tourists, and because the city is quieted down, you can hear the birds more, and you can hear the bells ringing at the bells that were given as a gift by the people of Holland to the people of British Columbia at the end of World War II for all the sacrifices that the British Columbians made in that effort. And I've been thinking and writing about a relative of ours whose his name was Private Sebastian Mike, who was killed October 23rd, 1944 in Holland as a member of the Calgary Highlanders. And so to hear those bells, close to every hour, but then especially around the dinner hour when they go for an extra minute or two, I think of him and I think of Holland. And I've been thinking about that writing even more so than I would have had the opportunity before. And I feel a great purpose in terms of writing and working and contemplating on that. So that is definitely a blessing that I contemplate every single day.
Thank you. Laura, you mentioned at the beginning of the conversation that, you're writing the book that you're meant to write now, about the sea and the use, and I suspect exploitation of our oceans. And again, in this moment, witnessing how quickly decisions are made and activity can be stopped when something is deemed an emergency. Obviously, these are questions and conversations that are happening in the environmental movement and amongst environmental activists and writers. And I'm wondering if you can talk a bit about, perhaps you're not someone who wants to make recommendations about what we should do, but I'd love to get your insight about what this moment could lead us to afterwards in terms of thinking about the health of our planet, in terms of equality, in terms of all of our safety and security.
Yeah. It's interesting that Troy was talking about the birds coming back and being able to hear all the different noises. There's been a lot of sort of nature is healing stories going on right now. And then on the sort of flip side of that, the coronavirus and the pandemic is wreaking a lot of havoc. There's a lot of suffering going on right now. But one thing that I find sort of helpful is that I think that this moment is sort of shedding a lot of light on hidden worlds and hidden lives and rules and regulations that support a global economy that we couldn't really see before. So a good example of that is a chapter in my book, The Imperiled Ocean, is about cruise ships. And I wrote about the labor conditions on board cruise ships and why major cruise ships that are headquartered in the US or in the United Kingdom, why they fly flags from places like the Bahamas or Bermuda. And it's because these countries have lighter regulations. And this wasn't front page news before. But in the age of coronavirus, this weird little quirk of high seas law has become a headline item because cruise ships have played a role in the early days of the coronavirus. And now people are talking about this law because we're talking about why the US is not giving federal stimulus aid to cruise ships. And it's because they're running ships that are based out of Bermuda or the Bahamas. And so all of a sudden we can see the connection to this law that no one really thought about how it would impact their lives. So I think that the coronavirus has been really helpful in showing us all the ways in which we're connected and also how vulnerable we are. So I think that this moment there could actually be something good and hopeful that comes out of it.
Yeah, thanks. We're getting close to opening this up for comments. I'm going to go to Lorax for a second, but I just wanted to remind everybody who is watching that they can ask questions in the comments section, and they can also use the hashtag WT Inside Voices if you had any questions or comments for our participants, for our rising stars. Lorax, the nature of the work that you do right now around transparency and privacy, I'd love to hear from you on your insight about, again, what comes out of this moment. We've seen in other places in the world a kind of acceptance of digital surveillance using our cell phones to help track the disease, the spread of the disease. We've seen, understandably so, we've had, governments being able to shut things down and exert extraordinary powers on citizens. And again, this is to stop the spread of a very deadly and devastating virus. At the same time, there are obviously enormous issues around human rights and democracy. And I'm wondering if you can talk a bit about what you've observed, or perhaps what your fears or concerns are about what you see emerging in this moment in the area of privacy, surveillance, and those sort of attendant issues.
Yeah, so I would say that it will be difficult moving forward for anyone to say that we're not capable of collective change and taking radically different paths from how things have been going. I think that it'll be that's a positive that I take from this time, that maybe a few months ago people were resigned to everything continuing along these really destructive lines, and privacy being taken for granted and used as this sort of resource that we can't really control. And now I see a lot more awareness of the devices that we are relying on, and they've in some ways become our connection now to social life or to jobs and school, and we're becoming more screen dependent during the pandemic than we were maybe before, and with that comes more, I would say, shared awareness of the trade-offs that the system is built around. And I don't know if there's going to be a privacy preserving way of tracking the disease. I think it's been interesting to hear the ethical concerns around immunity passports, and well, why don't we already have those conversations about the existing passport system of movement? So it's been a really interesting time to try to make people think outside of the boxes maybe that they've been protecting themselves inside for a long time. So yeah, it's been a weird time. Definitely some of the political things that people have brought up about how quickly the government can bring out social programs when there's a pandemic as an excuse to do so. Well, there was long before a public health crisis around substance users and other life or death situations every day in our cities. So yeah, I think that it'll be harder for government to tell us that they can't do something when we know, actually, we saw how quickly you can move And I hope that we become more bold in what we expect from our society and from our leaders.
Yeah. We are 10 minutes before our close, and I wanted to bring in a question, which is a great one, from Anita Chong on Facebook, who said, there has been much talk about having to redefine what we mean by essential. And this is the question to our writers. What experiences or questions about what we mean by essential will stay with you even when we return back to normal? And they've put normal in quotes. So I guess I'll just throw that out to the group. I don't know if somebody wants to leap in, but the question is, what experiences or questions about what we mean by essential will stay with you after this? Have any of you sort of, I guess, maybe rethought that question about, I mean, I feel like there's these sort of kind of closing conversations were about this idea of, you know, what we've taken for granted or assume was a default or assume was not fixable or assume is a way of being that we have to live with. And I'm wondering if any of you will take something away from this time and have that be a new essential for you.
I mean, I can go.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, to extend what I was saying earlier about the nature of work in the world, and we know that this form of work that we have comes from a very brutal history of violence, subjugation, capitalism, slavery. That's what's led us here. And so I guess for a person like me who's given over to paying attention to these kinds of things, I think I was always aware, at least in my adult life, that, you know, these various systems of value that are applied to things are very uneven, and some of them are downright anti-life. And so this is just becoming more and more plain. You know, I've said elsewhere that I'm quite sympathetic to the fact that a lot of people in the world are actually operating from a place of unawareness that don't really know exactly how the world works. And a number of us in this square of the internet have said similar things in the last hour. And so, yes, to look at what is essential, what we actually need, and the people who are thrust into these various calculuses of essentialness are the most vulnerable, are people who are already on the lower echelon of societal value if we base it on what the dominant narratives have told us. And so, yeah, this idea of essential workers and what's essential speaks a kind of truth, while at the same time exposing a lot of the untruths that we've taken as true in our modern in modernity, you know. And so yes, it's a good time to be with that and to make demands as Lorax was saying before, for a better future.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I guess I wanted to say it was hard to immediately answer the question because I'm doing a lot of listening right now, and I just wanted to say that disabled folks are really leading the conversation right now about what, in my view, about what we had previously thought was essential and what was possible. Things like working from home and even from the literary perspective, what went on with the Fold, with the Festival of Literary Diversity, which all of a sudden people that, well, now that none of us can leave our homes, things that we've been told for years were absolutely impossible are possible. And so I don't have I'm just listening to what other folks are saying right now. I have to watch my I called it doom scrolling earlier, and I have to watch my Twitter input because it's not always helpful. But disabled folks are really, really the people to listen to right now. And I just also want to acknowledge too that it's, once again, it's the situation of folks from marginalized communities needing to advocate for themselves. And so, there's a tremendous amount of work, labor going into this, but there's a lot, it's really important to be listening to those folks right now. At Twitter, maybe there are other avenues. I'm a Twitter addict, so that's where I get my information, but there's some really, really good work going on there.
Yeah. Thank you so much. It's time to wrap up. That was, I think, a great note to end on. I want to congratulate all of you again. It was such a pleasure to have this conversation with you. I wish it would have been otherwise and we could have had this in person, but I have to say how excited I am that you are the 5 folks who have received this this Rising Stars acknowledgement for this year, because like I said, my selection of Lorax was a selfish one, and I feel selfish on behalf of all the selectors to have more of your work in the world, to give you the money and the time to continue to write. I can't think of 5 voices that are more urgent and vital and necessary right now than yours. So Lorax, Canisia, Laura, Carly, and Troy, congratulations again. What a pleasure to talk with all of you. I want to thank everybody who has been watching for this past hour. And I also want, on behalf of the Writers' Trust, to thank the sponsors. The Writers' Trust Rising Stars program is made possible by the generosity of 5 program sponsors: Margaret Atwood, Carrie Cullen, and William Bonnell, Claire Duff, Deb McLeod, and Ward Sellers, and 1 anonymous donor. Additional support is provided by the Banff Centre for the Arts and Creativity and the Art Gallery of Ontario. A final reminder to viewers that the final deadline for the Canadian Writers Emergency Relief Fund is May 7th, midnight Pacific time. You can find details of that at writerstrust.com/relief fund. Donations are also being accepted from those who would like to show support to Canadian writers and writing. Again, thank you to all the Rising Stars. Thank you to their selectors. Thank you to the Writers' Trust. Read these writers, support your local independent bookstores, and support these phenomenal voices. Thank you, all of you. Be well and be safe.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can't wait to meet you all. Bye.